Marta, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me. So just to skip the introduction, and also instead of vision, I will present you a data stewardship version in a nutshell, because we are sort of running out of time. And just to mention, the slides are available, so if you would like to download them, you're able to do so. And the Twitter with the link to the slides should be coming into the Twitter feed. So as Danny has already mentioned about the TU Delft strategic framework, I would just like to highlight again that openness is really one of the key principles that are present in that framework. There are 4 major principles, and openness is really one of them. It's one of the most important. You can read the blog post about how do we want to implement openness across TU Delft, across the whole campus. And just coming back to that, why TU Delft insists on openness? And I think that's really coming back again to Danny's presentation. If you think about why do we care about open research, about open science, that really comes back to research integrity and research reproducibility. And I would like to refer here to a quote from John Tennant. He was part of Dies Natalis, that was a big celebration and the launch of the strategic framework of TU Delft. He actually mentioned that the opposite of open science is not closed science. Nobody wants to be a closed scientist, but it's bad science. If we really have reproducible research, if we care about research integrity, we should be proud to open our research results. So I mentioned how TU Delft cares about open science principles, and it's part of the strategic framework. Now I would like to make some references to how we try to implement open sciences across the campus. And here I have to refer a bit to the history. So colleagues who are now in the room, Annemiek and Anke, back in 2015, they did a series of open science roadshows. So what it was really, that was presentation aiming to encourage researchers across the whole campus, for every department, every faculty at TU Delft, to tell them about the principle of open science and why we think it's important to put open science into practice. So what happened afterwards? The researchers thought, yes, okay, we are not against open science. We don't want to be the bad scientists, so that sounds good. Like, why not? However, quite reasonably, and again, Danny mentioned, to be open required some time investment. So they were a bit afraid that, okay, I'm not against that, but that seems to me like a bit more work for me. So is somebody going to help me with becoming more open, with putting open science practices into my daily workflows? So then this trio, Alistair joined that wonderful team at that stage. We're thinking, okay, let's see what we can do about this. And they came to the leadership at TU Delft, and at that time we had our rector magnificus, Karel Leiben, who thought, okay, if we really want to do as we preach, if open science is so important at TU Delft, we need to support researchers if this is the limiting factor for them to try to implement the open science practices. And what happened? We decided to hire data stewards, and there was strategic funding at TU Delft to kickstart the project. We got money for 3 years from the beginning of 2018 until the end of 2020 to kickstart the data stewardship at TU Delft. So now you might want to say, so what is she talking about? What do data stewards have to do with open science? And that really comes back to what I mentioned before. If you are not a good steward of your data, if you don't manage your data properly, if you don't know how the different files and the analysis you did relate to each other, how on earth would you be able to open your data at the end? So in a way, what we really think that unless you do your research properly from the beginning, you are stewarding your data properly, you can't really think about opening up your results at the end. So in a way, good data stewardship is the necessary prerequisite of open science. So that's how it all comes back together. Okay, and now I would like to tell you a little bit about the history of the project, and I would like to tell you a little bit about the key principles behind the project. So really, in a nutshell, how do we see data stewardship happening? So first of all, and one of the main principles is that we would really like research to stay central and to be central in that whole approach. So in a way, our aim is not to come to researchers and to tell them how to do research. Yes, we tell you now, we change all your practices. You don't know how you should be doing your research practices. That's all wrong. We now tell you what you should be doing. These are the workflows you should follow. The idea is completely different. Data stewards are to build trust, to build communication with researchers, to discuss their workflows, to be interested in their research processes. So what are your current workflows? Can we perhaps do some incremental changes to your existing workflows and procedures to make them a little bit better, to make your data management a little bit more efficient? So the objective here is really to improve cultures, improve the practices, not to look at compliance. Our interest is not to increase compliance rate with any kinds of policies. And coming back to that, as I mentioned, to build the trust, to be able to have this conversation with researchers, our assumption behind the project was that we really need to have people who understand the subjects, the disciplines, who will be able to connect with researchers and understand their workflows and the procedures they are using for their daily practices. So as you can see here, the images, we have 8 faculties at TU Delft. And our idea was to appoint a dedicated data steward, so hire new people, who will be responsible for taking data stewardship forward, who will be the data steward of the faculty. And what do we mean by subject specific? By subject specific, we mean that we look for either people with a PhD degree in the area of the faculty or people who really have the experience and the expertise of how research is being done at the faculty. And of course, one may say that it's a bit controversial because I guess most of the universities went followed a different route, that we look for people who, for example, are specialists in information management. We thought that perhaps it's easier to train people who already understand the research process, who have years of experience of doing particular types of research, some principles about data management, than to train people to make them understand how research is being done, knowledge which people really acquire through years of practice and understanding all the pains of being a researcher. And of course, that meant that we had to develop lots of training for our data stewards to make sure that they do have the data management principles. And if you are interested in some examples of this, you can follow the blog post. Okay. So the next question is, you might ask, what do these data stewards actually do? And I will not go into details because you have presentations from individual data stewards. But here I would just like to use an analogy that I've actually stolen from the University of Utrecht. So thank you very much for that. That data stewards can be compared to general practitioner doctors. If you can think about them, that they are the first contact point. Whatever kind of questions you might have about research data, come back to me, I will try to help you and answer your question. And our idea here is that data stewards will be able to tackle about 80% of the questions about research data, and in 20% of the cases they will refer the researchers to the specialist. But anyway, they are the go-to person. For any questions about data, you call your data steward. And as I mentioned before, this reference to specialists. How do we find the specialists? How do we know who is the right person to contact for different types of questions? And for that, it's really key to collaborate across the whole university to deliver comprehensive and coherent services and advice to researchers. So I cannot emphasize this enough, how important it is to really work together with the service providers. So people like, for example, the Graduate School, the Valorization Center, Human Resources, and so on and so forth. And just to give you an example, Alistair already mentioned the GDPR. If you would like to make sure that researchers can manage their data safely in accordance with the new law, it's quite important that we work together. The ICT has to provide the safe storage for the data, secure storage for the data. The library provides the archival means for data. But meantime, we also have to work with the ethics committee to make sure the consent forms are right, with the legal team to make sure that whatever we do is actually legally right. So we really work hard to make sure that there is an effective collaboration between the different teams. So I just mentioned at the beginning, what we really care about is cultural change, and I'm talking about everything else but cultural change, so you might ask what is going on in here. So if you would really want to achieve cultural change, how would you measure cultural change? And that's a question that we've been struggling a bit at Delft, and I know that various people have been trying different ways to measure that, like by number of data sets in the archive, number of data management plans. Here at TU Delft, we decided to take a slightly different approach. We have a very short survey. These are about 10 simple questions that we send to the research community. And as I can show you as an example of one of these questions, a question, is your research data automatically backed up? We ran that survey across all the different faculties at TU Delft and asked them, yes, I'm not sure, and as Danny mentioned, sure, how can you be not sure if you can be not sure if you're pregnant or not, I suppose, or no, my data is not backed up. So in a way, you can see clearly down there that almost 50% of researchers at TU Delft don't back up their data. That's a big problem. We at least know that we have a lot of work to be done as data stewards. And our plan is to redo this survey on a regular basis to see if our practices are improving. And if you're interested, our colleague, one of the data stewards, Jasper van Dijk, did a very nice visualization of the survey results as well as shared the survey tool. So if you would like to run a similar tool at your institutions, you can reuse it. It's all available in the blog post. So, as I mentioned, the financial support that we received from the Central University has started in 2018. So what's next? What's the vision? I told you I would tell you about the vision. And I think as a reflection for the end of today, I would like to quote Karel Leiben. So this is his sentences he left with us, you know, when he was handing over the rectorship to the new rector, mentioning that at the moment we are trying to appoint a data steward at faculty. And as Alistair mentioned, that's not so easy to find 10 data stewards. But what Karel said, that if we really care about good data management, about open science principles, probably the target should be at least 1 data steward per department. So hopefully the project will grow and we shall see. And at the very end, I would like to tell you that there will be no questions, because you have coffee break and I don't want you to separate you from that, but also because you will have presentations from 5 individual data stewards here at TU Delft, and I think some of the questions will be answered by them. And anyway, I'm available for the entire day, so please grab it during coffee break, lunch break. I will be delighted to talk with you a bit more. Thank you.